Tonight, well, let me start with an introduction to the League. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan grassroots organization working to protect and expand voting rights and ensure everyone is represented in our democracy. The League of Women Voters of Corvallis encourages informed and active participation in government while influencing public policy through education and advocacy. We never endorse or oppose political parties or candidates, but we are political. We encourage you, oh, okay. We encourage you to get involved with the League of Women Corvallis by going to the website lwvcorvallis.org. The League has a few upcoming events. March 4th is the Universal Healthcare Town Hall presented by the Mid-Valley Healthcare Alliance and co-sponsored by the League. That's at 6:30 p.m. here in the library. March 14th is the legislative updates. That's after the session is over, so it ought to be really interesting. From 10:15 to 11:45 at the Calapooya Building on Research Way. March 18th, the Housing Committee has a program here in the library from 6:30 to 8 p.m., and it's titled Sheltering Our Unhoused Population. Are we making progress? And for more information on these programs, you can go to the League website and look under events. Our program tonight is part of the Know Your City series presented by the Community Planning Committee, along with our co-sponsors. I'll just name them off. The Corvallis Benton County Library, the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition, the Benton County Historical Society, and the City of Corvallis. And didn't I say the library? Yeah. The League of Women Voters Community Planning Position Statement supports a vibrant downtown with employment, retail, and housing. A strong central core of urban and governmental activity, including commercial, residential, and recreational facilities, while protecting the riverfront and historic structures and maintaining the vitality of downtown. This is similar to the Imagine Corvallis 2040 position, which states Corvallis supports its economy and local businesses with a vibrant downtown that combines employment, professional services, retail, housing, and entertainment to form an attractive business-friendly district. We have a pretty packed program tonight. We've divided it into sections. We have downtown past, downtown present, short-term future, which will talk about the work of the Downtown Vitality Strategy Task Force, and then projecting out into the long-term future. We have two colors of note cards on each chair. The white cards are if you have questions for our panelists. We have a panel, well, after the panel at the end, we'll have questions. You can write your questions on the white card, or if you have some ideas of what you would like Corvallis to look like in the long-term future, and this can be a big idea or a little idea, if you could write it on the blue card, and we'll go through as many of these as we have time at the end of the program. Because we have a number of speakers tonight, we printed out their bios for you, and there's a copy on each chair. So let's get started. Oh, here are our co-sponsors. And there's the agenda. And here's our first speaker. Our first speaker is Gemma Patterson from Engage Corvallis. And she'll be talking about downtown past. Engage Corvallis provides tours and other educational opportunities that connect people with local identity. And I really like this part of their mission statement. It said, "We believe knowing the stories of a place can lead to the well-being of that whole community, the community of Corvallis." And I should mention also, before we continue on, that there's information on the back about Engage Corvallis and some of the city programs and things like that, so you can get a little bit more information. Gemma?
I'm here.
Oh.
And I don't know if we have the same.
One question. On this pink form, are each of these categories ranked, or is it just check marks, or what did you want?
This is the survey from, how about I let Steve Clark talk about that survey a little bit later on, because he's going to be speaking towards that. This is a survey that is online. Some of you may have already responded to the survey online, but if you want to do it on a piece of paper, that's what that's for.
Okay, good evening. Is this too loud? Okay, great. So any of you who have ever been in a leadership Corvallis classroom that I'm leading know something weird's about to happen. So I would invite everyone, this is for pedagogical reasons, that's learning science, to, if you would like to, you can join me in closing your eyes, and we're just going to take 3 deep breaths together. We're going to make them, each one, a little bit slower. So on 3, we'll breathe in slowly. 1, 2, 3. And then out slowly. And now a little bit slower in. And a little bit slower out. And a little bit slower in. And then really long and slow out. Okay, wonderful, thank you. Now we are all ready to learn together. As Connie said, I'm Gemma Patterson. I'm the lead educator with Engage Corvallis, and this is, I've got to be in tour mode. I can't be back here. This is our 4th year giving local historic tours, mostly downtown. I think we have a slide. Let's see. Yeah. This QR code, I think, is also on the next slide. It goes to our website. And you can also take a photo, and you're welcome to take photos of any slides tonight. The ones that I put together, but hopefully the slides that everyone put together. We love engaged learners. And then Connie, thanks so much for talking about the mission of Engaged Corvallis. So we think that to increase the number of people working on problems in our community that make or break community wellness, we give tours because we like connecting people with stories. We think the stories give people a sense of shared identity. And then from that shared identity, they feel a sense of belonging. And then from that sense of belonging, hopefully a responsibility to engage in the kind of work that it takes to make our communities a great place. Any of you who have read any of Robin Kimmerer's work, you maybe remember the quote, "Good communities don't make themselves." So thank you for being here tonight. People tend to know Engage Corvallis from the Corvallis Chronicles tour, the sort of Corvallis 101, and a lot of what we're talking about tonight comes from that tour. We also do beer history tours and ghost and true crime tours and social justice tours. And there will be a discount code in the last slide if you want to attend the entire Corvallis 101 tour, since we're only going to get through like 10 minutes of that tonight. So takeaways tonight from this section are that decisions that we make in our communities last a long time, and that change takes a long time. And then this is just a reminder, we can't do questions during, but there'll be a Q&A at the very end. So we can't talk about the history of downtown Corvallis without talking about the forces that shaped the valley and going back 18,000 years. Ooh, this might be a little trouble. There's some words missing on the bottom of the screen, so I'm gonna have to tell you what they say. The Missoula floods, how many people in here have heard of the Missoula floods already? Yes, this is my favorite room of people. So a lot of you already know that 18,000 years ago, there were these floods, and they happened a minimum of 40 times, basically once every 50 years for about 3,000 years. And they picked up all this soil here and dumped it over and over in the Willamette Valley. So that we owe a lot of what's happening today in Corvallis to that. And that's all we have time for tonight. Downtown Corvallis was shaped by the reality of diminished Kalapuya presence. So non-Indigenous fur traders came to the Corvallis area in the 1770s and brought with them many diseases, including smallpox and malaria, and then eventually measles. So some estimates put Kalapuya population decimation at 97% by the time that Oregon Trail colonists started arriving. So the Kalapuya civilization that had stewarded and managed the lands here for abundance had far fewer members of their population populating the land in the mid-1800s than was the case pre-contact, and that made it much easier for the Oregon Trail colonists to start colonizing this land. Marysville. Joseph Avery, pictured here, was the predominant non-Indigenous person to take actions that still clearly affect the daily physical realities of downtown Corvallis life today. So remember that one of our two takeaways is that decisions last a long time. In 1851, he drew up this map of his vision for this community. So over here is the river, and then here we are up Monroe at the library. And he originally called it Marysville. You can ask in the QA at the end why it became Corvallis. This map he drew in 1851, that's not important. The map he drew in 1851 is in many ways the life that we are still living today. So the width of our streets have never changed. The lot size of our lots have never changed. We could also say that his lot sizes are more or less responsible for the parking realities that are a major source of local commentary that I will leave to the later presenters to field questions about. But I can explain that because our Corvallis blocks are so small, any parking garage that we could put that would necessarily cover the entire block would use up the bulk of its real estate for making turns inside the garage, not for parking. So that is part of the reason we do not have a parking garage in Corvallis. Joseph Avery, 1851. Well, that worked, but now we don't have slides. Let's see if we can do. Somebody else will find the next slide. And I can just tell you, railroads, the impact of railroads coming to town is another example of the decisions last a long time. So the actual infrastructure when the railroads arrived didn't change the shape of downtown very much, but the arrival of the railroads, because they brought this huge commercial opportunity, in both cases there was this big building boom, and because of the excitement about that, and many of those late 1800 buildings from the railroad arriving from Portland in 1879, and then a line that connected Corvallis to the coast in the late 1880s, each time there were a bunch of buildings built, and a lot of those buildings are still standing downtown today. You can ask at the end what happened to the railroad to the coast, why we don't really have a railroad to the coast anymore, or you can come on a Corvallis Chronicles tour on March 31st. Okay, so now we're going to talk about, we do need the picture soon. Now we're going to talk about an example of both of our takeaways, the fact that decisions last a long time and that change takes a long time. So A.D. Taylor was hired in 1926 by the campus to advise them on planning. How do we make a pretty campus? They did an okay job. He also ended up advising the city, and he said to the city at the time, you're running out of open space. You should get rid of the school that's in the park across from the library, that's across from the library, and make it a park. And now that the steamboats have pretty much fallen out of fashion and cars and trucks are the core of the commercial transport world, you should turn the waterfront into a park. This idea was not rapidly embraced. The powers that be, thank you. That's the right place, beautiful. So the powers that be did see that it might be wise for the city to own the waterfront property, especially because a lot of it wasn't being as utilized as it was during the steamboat era. So they did begin to slowly acquire it, but that park idea they thought was kind of silly. So out of the A.D. Taylor ideas of get rid of the school across from the library, turn it into a park, and then this waterfront thing, it took 10 years for the school to be dismantled and Central Park to be created. And the feelings that the community felt were very similar to the ones that people felt when the Corvallis High School was redone. And then much, much longer for the waterfront to become a park. So for tonight, we have represented 125 years of change on the Corvallis waterfront for you, starting with this photo. So this view is taken roughly across the river near the bridge. And as you can see, the waterfront here is industrial and treeless. This 1910 photo, going back even farther, this 1910 photo is also industrial and treeless. And this is the closest thing we have to a before photo of the A.D. Taylor era. And then this 1946 photo is the closest thing we have to an after photo. So it did make it on here. So there's the Benton Hotel across from the courthouse, and you can see the courthouse up there just so you can get oriented. And then here's our waterfront starting from the bridge onward, and you can see all the buildings and this sort of parking lot kind of area. So that's the waterfront in 1946. And that's 20 years after A.D. Taylor said, hey, you guys should make this a park. The city in this picture does not own all the lots. Now we have the waterfront in 1950. So you can see that there are buildings still standing along the river. And especially here where the fountain and the play structure are today. The trees are starting to return a little bit. And the city in 1950 is on the cusp of owning all the lots. So change takes a long time. This is now 25 years after A.D. Taylor's recommendation, still not following it. And in fact, a city engineer is about to propose that with all this property that's been acquired and that they use eminent domain to require the rest of it, and then they take that Highway 34 bypass that's across the river, and the idea was that we should put it right down First Street.
Oh, wow.
So they said, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. Let's put that down First Street. So they started buying up the land to do that. And change takes a long time. In this case, I think we probably all agree, luckily, they did not succeed in getting the highway down First Street. So here's the waterfront in 1969. And at this point, the city owns all the lots, and the public opinion of the plan to put the highway down First Street has reversed after 15 years has gone by. So I think the photo speaks for itself. So in this photo, we're 3 years shy of citizens going rogue on Earth Day in 1972 because they were so sick of this public land not addressing public needs. Largely, they wanted what A.D. Taylor had proposed. Nearly 50 years previously, they wanted this beautiful recreational waterfront, but change takes a long time. So how many of you know about what happened in Earth Day 1972 on the waterfront? Yeah, I knew there was gonna be a handful of people here. That is awesome. So for everybody who doesn't know, there was this rogue group of citizens that came together. There were Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts. There were a few garden clubs. Lots of people come. They marched to the waterfront with wagons full of tools and plants and got to work on a beautification effort, working really hard. And that action was the seed for what we finally have today. So from that day, after 20 more years of grassroots care of the waterfront, the city convened a task force in 1991 to explore, finally, investing in this part of downtown. So about this part of downtown investment, raise your hand if you remember the next 10 years of discussions and committee meetings and slightly vitriolic newspaper editorials that ensued. Yeah, okay. Some good memories in the room. So here's what happened. 1991, way down here, let's get this task force going. Everybody agrees we got to invest in the waterfront. In fact, we've been saying this for 70 years. Let's do something about it. So the task force does its job, and now we're ready for a commission in 1994. Now in 1997, we finally have a design. We get it approved. Then 1998, the voters agree to pay for it. 1999, wait, part of this plan seems really bad to some people. We have some different ideas. Those people propose. In 2000, those people propose a new plan. The voters say no. Then the opponents of the original plan appeal. And then it takes until 2001 for the appeal to be denied and for construction to begin. And then in 2002, the park opens. And this is more than 10 years after everyone officially agreed something needs to be done. And 30 years after many folks unofficially took matters into their own hands. And about 50 years after the first municipal waterfront plan highway bypass failed, and 150 years after the first permanent colonists started using the waterfront for a transit station and a freight shipping outlet and an industrial park. So 2002, Corvallis finally has a waterfront park. Change takes a long time. So here's where we landed after 70 years of industrial use, followed by 35 years of limbo, and then 15 years of the highway pursuit, and then 30 years of vigorous civic engagement. So I think you have great examples now of that fact that decisions last a long time. The decision to use the waterfront as an industrial area lasted a long time, and that change takes a long time. Before I cede the floor, oh yeah, I got time for this, sweet. I wanna give us an opportunity to thank the task force, speaking of task force, that are going to be presenting to you in about 15 minutes. Being on a task force is unpaid work, and only a few of the folks doing it are represented here tonight, a few of the folks doing that work. And you can see from the example of how Riverfront Change played out that this work takes enormous patience. So let's give them a round of applause, everybody who has that patience to do this work. And I also want to thank the very next presenters. So cities the size of Corvallis, you may not know, struggle with really high turnover as employees make career moves that inevitably involve going to bigger places who have deeper pockets. And so we are super lucky to have Ryan and Christopher tolerating the fight for elbow room at City Hall. How many of you know that City Hall was moved to where it is now temporarily in 1955? And we're still waiting on a new plan. So I invite applause for Ryan and Christopher as well for their service to this community. Thank you. And then finally, thank you. I don't know where the thank you, there's a thank you slide that's missing. Well, thank you all for being here today, for showing up and participating in community. As Robin Walkhammer says, good communities don't make themselves. And if you like this kind of community participation, you can do more of it. If you are interested in doing it via this type of learning, you can come on a tour. We have Barbie tours starting on Sundays. They're at noon and 1:30 for the next 3 Sundays. And they cover women's history in Corvallis, women, and also women who are making history in Corvallis. So some of it's looking back, but a lot of it's also looking around. Ghost and True Crime Tour, I think there's one on Sunday. The Corvallis Chronicles tours, I think, start at the end of March. And then you can get season tickets, and the Parks and Rec just opened up. There's a 7-week class that you can take that covers a whole bunch of facets of the history of Corvallis starting in late April. The QR code. Oh, we'll send around mailing list sign-up sheets. Oh, we have a little clipboard, and anybody who writes legibly will be able to hear when the season schedule is announced. That's it. So thanks again for being civically engaged, and thank you to the League of Women and Voters for giving everyone this opportunity.
Thanks, Gemma. Next up, we have the Downtown Present. We have Ryan Ameton, who is a senior planner with Corvallis Community Development, and Christopher Jacobs, who is the manager of the Corvallis-Benton County Economic Development Office.
Good evening, everyone.
Great to be with you. I see a lot of familiar faces. If we've not met before, my name is Christopher Jacobs. I'm the Economic Development Manager for Corvallis Benton County. With me, I have Ryan. This one? I might not even need that.
You do.
Hello.
Does this one work?
Okay, can you hear me? Great, thank you. Good evening. My name is Ryan Ameton. I'm a senior planner with the planning division with the city of Corvallis. I've been here for about 11 years. And in that time, I was once upon a time when there was a downtown advisory board. I was the staff person for the downtown advisory board. I also worked on a mixed-use zones update that updated some of the development regulations downtown. And we'll dig into that a little bit more in a minute. I think Christopher is going to kind of lead us off in Downtown Present.
Yeah, okay, that's a little bit louder, thanks. All right, so to open us up, I want to highlight some key things that'll kind of ground us in what we're seeing now in downtown. Property ownership changes as folks have retired, properties have been purchased, we've seen a reinvestment in a number of properties. The plazas, perhaps one of the better examples of that, the old JCPenney building. We see parking challenges and policy changes, and Ryan's going to talk a little bit more about CFAC and what that is, and yeah.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to give you a bit of a dry presentation about development regulations. Because I think it's important to know what you can do downtown as we're talking about the future of downtown, what we want downtown to look like. We have to understand what are the limitations in terms of development, what can you do, what can't you do. So regulatory development considerations. First, I guess we need to define what downtown is. We have policy documents that talk about downtown. We have a comprehensive plan. We have a Vision 2040. And we have a comprehensive plan map. The comprehensive plan map designates a central business district, and they're implementing zones for that central business district. So if you don't know what zoning is, a zoning is a set of development regulations that dictates development standards and permitted uses within a certain area. They get applied to those zones get applied to properties, and that tells you what you can and can't do on those properties. In downtown, we have, as the comprehensive plan defines downtown, we have 4 zoning designations. The primary one is called Commercial Mixed Use 3. This came out, this was actually adopted in 2022, so fairly new, but it's not a huge departure from the previous zoning designation, which was called Central Business. But that was the result of about a 4-year effort. I think I saw Court Smith in the room. Court, there he is. Court was on an advisory committee that helped us kind of shape these zoning designations. We consolidated a number of commercial zones into basically 3, and the most intensive one was applied downtown. There's also in downtown, it's one called the Commercial Business Fringe, which is on the north side of downtown, kind of north of Polk. There's the Agriculture Open Space Zone, which is over the Riverfront Park, which is kind of our park zone. And then there's something called the Willamette River Greenway Overlay, which is, I think, a 100-foot buffer along the Willamette River, and any new development in that buffer, if it's not residential, has to go through a discretionary public hearing process. As we adopted the new commercial mixed use zones, we also adopted an incentive for mixed use buildings. So if you do a mixed use building anywhere in the city, including downtown, you get a height bonus of 18 feet. And that's a way to incentivize people to put commercial on the first floor without having to lose that residential income. They can put that on top. There are historic resources throughout downtown. There's a historic district, the Avery Helm Historic District, which overlaps with downtown. And then there are individually designated historic properties throughout downtown. And anything that's a designated historic resource is pretty much impossible to redevelop. And I'll show you on the next slide where those are located. Senate bill, so the state, as you may or may not know, has been very focused on housing development over the past few years. And so they have been giving us obligations to update our code in various ways to allow residential development a little bit easier. One was in 2021, it was called Senate Bill 8, and that basically overrides local zoning for affordable housing projects. So if you want to do an affordable housing project, you can place that in any commercial zone, even if the local jurisdiction otherwise would prohibit that. And then there is in 2024, Senate Bill 1537, required jurisdictions of Corvallis' size to allow by right exceptions to certain development standards. As long as the developer demonstrates that those exceptions will allow them to provide additional housing units. So we had to update our code to comply with that. And what that means is that developers of housing can get things like reductions to setback and building setbacks, additional residential units on the first floor, and increase the maximum height, building heights. And that's all by right. There's no discretionary review of that. And then, as Christopher alluded to, the state has something called the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities Program that places additional obligations on cities like Corvallis. One that affected the citywide was we no longer can require off-street parking with new development. So that's the intent behind that is to incentivize kind of more efficient use of land as it gets redeveloped and not require developers to provide more off-street parking than they were needing prior to this. Now, that really doesn't affect downtown too much because downtown actually didn't require parking to begin with. Or I shouldn't say all of it. I think part of downtown did, but the core part of downtown didn't require off-street parking. So if we go to the next slide, I'll just show you kind of graphically. It might be hard to see some of this stuff, but everything that's in the darker red is what that commercial mixed use 3 zone that I was talking about, where building heights in this CMU 3 are allowed to go up to 105 feet. You can get that extra 18-foot bonus for mixed use development. And then in addition to that, you can get an additional, I think it's 20% or 1 story, whichever is greater, through that state mandated HLUA process. Up here is the central business fringe. So you can see North Arrow is kind of skewed here. I twisted things to get it all as much as I could on the screen here. The central business fringe is kind of a legacy zone. And I guess another thing I forgot to mention earlier was with the CMU zone, not only did we raise allowable building heights, but we also took a really close look at permitted uses and what kinds of uses are important to preserve in a downtown area, and what kind of uses are maybe not so conducive to active pedestrian spaces. So things like drive-throughs, gas stations, auto repair shops. As part of this update, we removed those as permitted uses from downtown. But that same exclusion did not get applied to the CB fringe. So if you want to do a gas station, this is where you do it. This over here is the Abraham Historic District. You can see how it kind of overlaps with the CMU. And then everything with a star on it, it's probably hard to see. But if you get up close, you can see there's a bunch of stars around. Those are all the designated historic resources. And those are the buildings that are pretty much off limits to redevelopment. The WRG overlay, you can see here. And like I said, any non-residential that's proposed within any part of that WRG overlay has to go through a discretionary public hearing process. I think that's enough for me. I'll hand it back to Christopher. I know we're kind of short on time.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. I think that sets us up well. I kind of got over my skis a little bit on the first slide. I want to come back. Mixed use code changes that Ryan has really described are really reshaping development patterns. And we see a potent combination of policy and incentive taking shape, causing projects like the Gordon Hotel and Residences to be financially feasible, or otherwise they wouldn't have been without these sorts of policy changes in commercial mixed use zones and without additional incentives like the multi-unit property tax exemption program, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. Basically, it provides up to a 10-year tax exemption for mixed-use housing. And so I can't understate just how often our office is called about this program, about doing mixed-use projects. And we're seeing that really take shape in some projects that are in the pipeline and currently under construction. We see emergent leadership from the Main Street organization and the downtown Corvallis organization following the dissolution of the DCA over the last 5 years, and some success with that new organization in securing the Main Street Revitalization Grant Pro award for the plaza in downtown Corvallis. We do see power constraints from deferred maintenance of Pacific Power and high cost of public infrastructure, making a real challenge of development projects in downtown and throughout the city. Elevated vacancy rates relative to the other commercial areas of the community. 3.5% is what we have throughout Benton County. We have about 11% in downtown Corvallis. So we do still see elevated vacancy rates, but there's a number of reasons for that. Property consolidation is one of them. And then I would say the tourism economy is in transition. Christina Recklaw from Visit Corvallis could talk a lot more about that. With the dissolution of the Pac-12, we're seeing a lot of rethinking about what drives tourism to downtown, what it means to have a vibrant downtown, and to support our tourism economy in a new way. So as I mentioned, MUPD is a transformational tool for mixed-use development in downtown Corvallis. That'll continue to be the case. I anticipate that over the next 5 years, the scale of downtown will change dramatically because of, like I mentioned, the potent combination of policy and incentive driving that development. Tax increment financing is a tool first adopted in South Corvallis in 2019 by a vote of the people. They're talking about, when I say they, City Council has initiated a feasibility study to be completed this year to consider tax increment financing in downtown Corvallis. We spoke a little bit about the Main Street Revitalization Grant. That's $325,000, which is one of the larger state awards granted to a project in downtown Corvallis in a long time. And then I want to highlight that the task force recommendations can really help create a vision and planning document for downtown Corvallis. I spent the first 10 years of my career in Michigan, so I'm really familiar with tax increment financing and downtown master plans. It's been sort of shocking just to see the absence of a downtown plan on the books, really driving progress forward, and the absence of financing tools to do the major things that you might want to accomplish. And so it's a positive thing to see the task force putting together that template for what might inform a tax increment financing plan and what might be the bones of a downtown master plan. So we mentioned the Gordon Hotel and Residence. This is one of the mock-ups. That project is under construction currently. I think it's anticipated to open spring of 2027. This is what it looks like. A nice sunny day in the middle of February. It's nice to see cranes downtown. As a person who's a development guy for this city, a crane is a good sign of investment. I hope we see more in the future. And the next thing I want to talk about is the second MUPD application that was received by the city in November. That is set to be considered by City Council on March 16th. It's a 13-story mixed-use project known as Pine View Development. It's 263 units, and it's a $132 million project, 4th and Western. So when we talk about the scale of downtown changing and its urban form, and the causes of that in present day, this is what it really adds up to, these sorts of development changes.
That's the northeast corner of that intersection?
It's taking up all the way from the Tacos El Machine former property through the Corvallis Daytime Drop-In Center to the corner. That whole half a block.
Northwest. Yeah. And then that development borders the Avery Helm Historic District?
It does.
So in the Avery Helm Historic District, you'd have a hard time putting in weatherized windows. But on the same block, the sky's the limit.
That is how the commercial mixed-use zoning allows for development.
Where is that project now?
Let's hold the questions until the end, though, because of the time constraints. So we'll have time for questions at the end.
Thank you.
So go ahead.
And so here are just some of the ground floor plans for the Pine View Development Project. Here's kind of a layout of what a typical floor plan for the housing might look like. There's a bunch of amenities on the top floor that this kind of outlines. I know this is difficult to see. I'm happy to provide this following the meeting to anyone who's interested. And then some conceptual drawings of the sort of metal cladding and heavy use of windows that are anticipated to be featured in the Pine View Development Project. Next, I want to talk about tax increment financing. Those in Oregon may know it as urban renewal. It's a pretty outdated term. Tax increment financing is not a new tax. It is the utilization of tax revenues from a given point in time forward through a 30-year plan typically for projects outlined in what's known as a tax increment financing plan and report. How you get to a tax increment financing plan and report is you undertake a feasibility study, usually with community input, to figure out how big the district is going to be, what kind of revenues you can generate, what you might do with those revenues. So that's what we're underway with now in the feasibility study with a consultant that's been contracted with the city. Corvallis is one of few requiring a vote of the community. Maybe only 5 communities in Oregon have a vote requiring tax increment financing. As I mentioned, it doesn't raise taxes. It requires future tax revenue derived from growth within a district during the plan to be used for specific established purposes in that plan and report. And lastly, I want to highlight the plaza. These are some photos from that project. If you haven't been there, we just issued the final reimbursement request for that grant. And I want to give a kudos to Lee and Tony for their tremendous work revitalizing the former JCPenney property with 5 new restaurants, 22 retail and creative studios, and a brand new mezzanine that's a lot of fun to be in.
Just where is that?
It's at 425 Southwest Madison, where the old Starbucks was and where it now is Coffee Culture. And I know that we have time at the end for questions. I'm looking at the clock here, seeing about 4 minutes left. Would it be okay if we touched on some of those questions now, or do we want to wait until the end?
It'd be better to wait till.
Got it. Well, then I think that's all we have for you.
Next up, we're going to look at the near-term future of Corvallis with Steve Clark, who is the co-chair of the Corvallis Downtown Vitality Strategy Task Force, along with many other roles he's had in the community over the years.
Thanks much. Most of those roles were good. This is my second go around at Corvallis. I was a student at Oregon State from 1971 to 75 when dinosaurs walked the earth. I returned to Oregon State in 2011 as one of the vice presidents and had the pleasure of working with many of you in the audience today on many important issues for our community. With Julie Manning, I co-chair the Downtown Vitality Strategy Task Force. It's probably the largest task force in the history of Corvallis, 40 people. We sought to have that size for a very important reason. Community engagement in Corvallis is essential. It's also essential to have the counselors, city councilors involved, and thankfully all 9 of them are involved in this effort. And what is this effort about? It's really about creating both a short-term, a mid-term, and a long-term strategy to improve the vitality, the health, the safety, and the welfare of downtown Corvallis, not only for the downtown, but to benefit the entire Corvallis community, and really with that, Benton County. And before you today, there was a question about the questionnaire you have. You have before you 3 sheets of paper. There are 28 conceptual improvement strategies for downtown that we would like you to look at and determine what is your top 1 of all of these 28 and what is your 2nd through 5. And if you don't have the opportunity to fill that out today, use the QR code to fill that out. We also have with you 2 postcards, actually 1 postcard which drives you to our website, which tells you a lot about the task force. I have that both in English and in Spanish, so I have more so we can share with community members. What I'd like to share with you tonight is just very briefly a little bit about what we're doing. We're taking the lead of the city council and the community, as you saw with our visioning plans, to improve downtown to become an even better part of the community, to be a thriving part of our community as a hub for all of Corvallis, to recognize its past, its present, and its future. We're taking stock that this isn't about reinventing the wheel, it's about taking the wheels of community engagement before, whether it's about downtown parking, about priorities that the council has established, about discussions for a civic campus, about the work of the cultural efforts in downtown, about the work of the Downtown Corvallis organization, and other efforts to build upon those and grow them. As I said, we're a big task force. It's been meeting since June. An executive committee of 12 people, 3 subcommittees, economy, infrastructure, and environment. And each within these categories are dealing with complex issues that we are taking stock of to try and recommend to the city council, not to try, but to recommend to the city council in June. And what are we going to provide? We're going to provide a series of strategies that provide a clear picture of endeavors, actions, investments, activities that will improve our downtown. And we will provide a sense of which of those should occur now in the next 1 to 3 years, which should occur in the next 4 to 7 years, and which should occur in 11 years and beyond. So it's just not all about now. It's really, as we heard from Gemma, it's about a long-term effort. And so the task force is asking you tonight, and over the last 2 months, we've been conducting significant community outreach about what are your opinions about what should occur in downtown as it relates to housing or transportation, parking, behavior, access to the riverfront, housing, if I didn't mention it, transportation safety, lighting, the gamut of issues, open spaces, public spaces, unused properties in downtown. Nothing about drive-through windows where I get Diet Cokes at McDonald's. However, taking stock of what people think is only one way of doing it in a meeting like this. We have conducted the online survey that you have access to. 1,600 folks have contributed thoughts already. You have the opportunity to add to that tonight and over the next couple days. 500 people have provided input on behaviors in downtown. We will compare that information from those 2 surveys along with the community survey provided by the city council and the city in this past fall, which I think about another 600 to 800 people contributed. We'll take all of that information and in the next 2 months begin to work to develop a series of strategies, tactics, actions, and investments that are shaped in now, next, and later. We will also provide a sense of who does this work. In each of those recommendations we provide, we'll provide a sense of, should this be a public process by the city? Should be a joint process by the public sector and the private sector? Should this be about private investment? Or should an organization, not facetiously, the League of Women Voters have a major role in helping to form actions that will move this community forward in its downtown? The Chamber of Commerce, other organizations, the university. And so by delivering this to the council, we will give the council and after that the community a report that could be the strategy to move Corvallis's downtown forward in ways that we heard from Christopher haven't been available for many, many decades. Now that requires some choices. In the future, that one of those choices might be around urban renewal. One of those choices might be for the Chamber of Commerce to say, we're going to lead efforts to introduce ways that new businesses can actually succeed beyond their first year. Highest risk of failure of a business is in the second year. So we have lots of efforts that we can make choices about. What I would like is to ask for the opportunity for the league, those people that are here tonight, to look at our report when we issue it to the council in mid-June of this year. And after that, bring that to the community and tell us whether or not we got it right. And please, where could you plug into helping us to advance that effort in the next 11 years or more? Again, now is the next 3 years. Next is years 4 through 7. Later is years 7 and beyond, 8 and beyond. Hopefully all of us will be here for that and we can do our best to help it make it happen. at the end of tonight's meeting able to answer questions. If you'd like to send me a note, my email address is osusteve1, numeral 1, @gmail.com. You can call me on my cell phone, 503-502-8217, and I'll ask you to help and get involved. And I'm glad to take your input at any time. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Next, we're going to have a panel where we're going to talk about the long-term downtown future. And this is the really long-term future, so kind of pie in the sky type things. So our panelists are Robin Lancaster. If you could come up and grab a chair. He's a software engineer and infrastructure enthusiast. Tucker Kirks, who is an OSU environmental sciences student, and Deanne Garcia, who is the president of the Downtown Corvallis organization and a downtown business owner. All three are also members of the Downtown Vitality Strategy Task Force. And as you formulate questions, remember your questions go on the white cards, your ideas go on the blue cards. And if you sort of wave your card around as you come up with a question, someone will come around and pick it up, and that'll make it a little easier for us to sort through those and get through them more at the end. So we're going to start off by posing some questions to the panelists and just see where we go with that. Our first question is, envision living in Corvallis in 10 to 15 years. If you could decide, how would it be different? Who wants to start?
I guess I will, unless you got it. You seem like you have it. Go for it.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, good. I get my own echo, so it's hard for me to tell. So I would say if I could wave a magic wand and change a few things about Corvallis, what I would see 15 years from now is a dense, well-lived-in, and art-filled core downtown. I would see young people, particularly young children, moving freely around our well-developed and safe active transportation network that's walking, pedestrian, and bicycle infrastructure. And then finally, I would see multi-generational, multicultural spaces where we have built the infrastructure of sharing an opportunity to connect with one another and learn from one another at our different stages in life and our different cultural and historical experiences.
From an OSU student perspective, I think one thing that I would really like to see in Corvallis is kind of mixing of the different groups here. So especially my freshman year, I primarily only really interacted with the downtown when I went to the Saturday market. And I think that a lot of other students at OSU also kind of do the same thing. But as I've gotten more involved through the task force and just also through my time in Corvallis and becoming more involved with my community, I found that there's definitely a lot of other things that downtown Corvallis has to offer. And I think that a lot of OSU students kind of only really interact with downtown within the context of like what's directly important to them, whether that be nightlife or the Saturday market, like I said, and they miss out on a lot of the other things that the community does have to offer.
So to make a foundation, I guess, for my answer, I would just say I first moved to Corvallis as a student in the early 2000s, and then after graduating, moved up to Seattle and Portland, and then came back here in my late 30s. And one thing I noticed right away was, oh my gosh, there's no one else in their mid-30s in this town. We have a lot of young people, and then when they graduate college, they leave, and they come back later in life. And I think a large part of that is unaffordability. I taught at OSU for 7 years. Almost every other instructor I taught with couldn't afford to live in this town. So I think that one thing I'd really like to see for Corvallis in the future that will influence whether our downtown truly can thrive is whether this town is a livable place for people at all ages and stages in their lives. And then I've also seen over the 25 years I've been either in or out of this town, that we have diversified a lot of ways. And we're still nowhere near where we should be. So I would love to see a lot more racial and gender minorities living openly in our community and not feeling like we live, I mean, I'm just kind of looking out, we're sort of a monoculture in a lot of ways here. And so I just love to see this town be a place where all of those people feel safe as well. So I think if we can achieve that as a larger community, then it's kind of interdependent on our downtown also thriving. If people who are at the age that they typically are when they start small businesses can't afford to live here, we will have more types of small businesses, more diversity in the types, as well as just diversity in who is running those businesses.
Next up, think about the other cities you have been in that have architectural elements that create a theme. Tie the downtown together, give it character, and make it inviting. How could Corvallis do that?
I have one quick answer, which would be awnings. It rains here a lot, if anyone's noticed, not this winter, but usually. And I think that having structured awnings throughout downtown that kind of add some visual consistency to different buildings as you move through the area can make some of our newer and less interesting buildings feel a little bit more tied to some of the historical structures. Also then has the double benefit of making it easier for people to hang out downtown in bad weather, which would make us much more possible for businesses to thrive throughout the whole year.
I kind of second awnings and like to expand on that a little bit. I'm originally from Arizona, so I'm not sure if anyone's been to Prescott in northern Arizona, but it's a similarly sized community to Corvallis. And I think that one thing I've noticed there is that it's pretty vibrant throughout all day and night there. And I think one of the things that they do really well is really strong lighting and signage for each of their businesses that stretches all throughout the community. And they have just kind of like uniform style throughout the community, which I think helps people feel safe and just willing to walk down throughout that entire community throughout all times of day and night. And I think that's one thing here that me and some of the other people that I've talked to have struggled with is that in downtown Corvallis, there are certain parts at nighttime that just don't feel as inviting, or you might not want to walk around because there's just not a lot of uniformity or I guess welcoming sort of signage. So.
Yeah, so I've lived in a couple of communities with very different strengths and challenges. So I grew up in Humboldt County, California, which is very similar in a lot of ways to Oregon. Similar climate, similar time of founding for the cities there, similar architecture. One of the things that the county seat in Humboldt County, where I grew up, does extraordinarily well is public art. Eureka has consistently had an annual mural contest where businesses volunteer their walls and internationally renowned artists come to town and paint thematically appropriate but very distinct murals on walls throughout all of downtown. And it's a city of art that just comes alive. And I think it's extraordinary in its diversity and also very cohesive because there's art everywhere. And I see we have a lot of beautiful buildings with big empty walls that I would love to see some art on in downtown. I also lived in Annapolis, Maryland, which had a very different set of challenges since it was built started being built in the late 1650s. So slightly different vintage of American city. One of the things that, in addition to a very active and very vocal historical society that Annapolis did extraordinarily well was signage. You could find your way around town with a very uniform and consistent, like Tucker was saying, set of signs that also contained a stylized, not quite as stylized as like the London Tube map or anything like that, but a stylized map that was very easy to navigate, helped you locate yourself, helped you find things. And then finally, just really well-marked public spaces, spaces that were not themselves commercial spaces, but were adjacent to commercial spaces and allowed people to do things other than spend money in town. Those were extremely well-organized, well-signed, well-marked, and well-loved in both communities that I lived in.
What do we want the character or focus of downtown to be? For instance, do we want it to be a government center, entertainment, art, recreation, dining, commerce, and service? And then also maybe talk about branding and what would a unified theme look like? I think we've touched on that a little bit already.
I guess my answer is kind of not a written answer. I don't think there should be one specific unifying theme. I think that tying to what I said earlier, to make sure that we're engaging all the groups that do live in Corvallis, we need to make sure that we're appealing to all of those things. Obviously, it's very important to have the government center, or just government facilities downtown, but it's also important to have businesses that pander to different groups of people. I guess we need to have stores that appeal to younger people, stores that appeal to older populations, and just make sure that I don't think there should be one unifying theme, because I think that we should make sure that we're making it an accessible community to everyone who lives here.
Yeah, it may be the stage in life that I find myself in, but I find myself evaluating Corvallis pretty much on the metric of would it be delightful for a child to grow up here? That feels to me like one of the most important litmus tests that we can apply to our city, because ultimately many of the things that children love are the things that we love: open space, freedom, adventure, opportunities to learn. So as I look around our city, I think the audience that I'd like to see attracted, or the emphasis that I'd like to see more in downtown, is spaces that are open and accessible to people who don't drive and to people who don't have a ton of money but want to be involved in civic and community life, and want to exchange ideas and have experiences in our city's municipal center. The other thing I'd like to see us do is continue to attract the kinds of businesses that support an enduring population. Like, in addition to the service businesses that we have downtown, also continue to recognize the fact that I think it was a Brookings Institute's paper where I read this. The author quipped that the very best thing a city can do for economic development is start a university and wait 150 years. And here we are. So one of the things that I would like to see us get better at doing is recognizing the absolutely phenomenal resource that we have in Oregon State University as an economic and intellectual engine, and to keep more of that skill, talent, and enthusiasm in our community instead of letting it fly off to other states and cities.
Yeah, I agree that we need an all of the above downtown. I think that it's super important that we do keep our city government centered down there, for one thing, because those are hundreds of employees who eat at our restaurants, who frequent our businesses, and as a business owner, we really rely on those people. And also, it just kind of makes sense. But at DCO, at Downtown Corvallis organization that I lead, we have a focus on trying to find those events, resources, cultural events, things like that, that might be able to tie together all of our different types of businesses along with residents, because a lot of people live downtown too. So it needs to be a core place in the city that you maybe just go to because you're like, I don't really know what else to do. I'm kind of bored. It's a nice day. I'm going to go down to the waterfront and just see what there is happening. Maybe there's somebody playing a guitar. Maybe you feel like having ice cream. Maybe you want to go to my place and do a sauna. You can find what speaks to you on any given day and not have it feel like, well, I only go there for the Saturday market. Spend your whole day there and see what else there is. And that should feel like a safe and welcoming place for students, for families, for anybody at any stage in their life. And that's just comes with an all of the above bottom line.
I think this next question we've pretty much answered, but if someone wants to add a little bit extra, that's good. And that would be, who do you want to attract to downtown? Business, customers, arts?
Yes. I was being facetious and saying, who do you want to attract? Business, customer, arts, students? Yes, yes. Yeah, I guess I do have one expansion, which is just to lean in to the notion that attracting a group of dynamic and engaging artists to downtown is a major way to cultivate a sense of place. Corvallis is one of those wonderful towns that has character oozing out of every corner, and yet sometimes town just kind of shuts down. There are moments where you walk around downtown at 8 p.m. and go, oh, is it 3 in the morning? Like, what? Everything's really quiet. So I'd love to see more music, more art, more reasonably volumed sound downtown at more times of day to cultivate a sense of presence and community.
I did have a thought, and then I got wrapped up in what you were saying. Do you have anything, Tucker? Okay, so
If you don't have anything, that's fine. Yeah, okay.
okay.
What are the 2 or 3 elements that are the most important?
Well, I mean, if anyone has an opinion on that, we'd love to get that in that task force survey. I think one thing that is super important is a perception of safety. I think that Corvallis is an incredibly safe community, but we don't always feel safe in some of our downtown spaces when you see trash or just things that don't say that this place is well cared for, bad lighting, things like that. That gives us a perception of being unsafe, and that makes people not want to hang out there. So I think that's just sort of a baseline, and with that also comes with cleanliness. Trash is very bad. And then I think just like a diversity of businesses. I think we have a couple of business types that we maybe have too many of in our downtown, and we'd like to see more variety. That's only 2, but yeah. What do you got?
Yeah, I think mine's very fitting for the task force subcommittee I'm on. I would say sustainability and safety are probably the 2 biggest things. Yeah, like you said, I think, yeah, safety's for sure. There's definitely been times at night that I've been walking around and I guess, yeah, it's more perception of safety than maybe actual safety, but I think that could definitely be improved. And then another thing is practical sustainability, I would say, which I'm not really sure how that would look, but I know, especially through being in the task force, a lot of people have their grievances with the parking situation in Corvallis, and I think that there's definitely, it's great to encourage other types of transportation, and that is something that should be focused on, but I think we also need to find ways to make sure that we're continuing the sustainability of Corvallis and making sure that that's happening and having forward motion while making sure that we're doing it in a practical way that works for the communities that live here.
Yeah, both excellent points. I would say I want to echo something Deanne said at the beginning of our conversation, which is affordability. I'm about to turn 30. I just got engaged, and I'm trying to decide whether Corvallis is the community that I'll live in for the rest of my life. And right now, that's a pretty hard ask. It is scary to contemplate buying a house here. It is scary to contemplate what the school system will look like in the future. And those big questions are circulating for me. So finding ways, I think the most important thing we can do is continue to add to our housing supply as much as we can, and also work hard on our housing mix. We are a community, as Tucker pointed out earlier, of a transient student group that is here for a certain amount of time. We also have a large retired community. Those people have different housing needs, and building housing that allows a graceful translation between those different groups is a big and difficult problem that we can get right because we have the right people here. We have world-renowned experts at Oregon State and at the University of Oregon who can help us get this right. But having a balance where if you're in a home, you're a homeowner right now, and you want to transition to a smaller home, that housing stock is available, and you're not competing with 100 other people for a right-sized home, thereby freeing up the slightly larger, maybe more suburban home you're currently in for a young family that could really use the space. And so building a sustainable and thoughtful housing supply that allows people to contemplate living in an affordable way in Corvallis is the most important thing for me. Second most important thing is a concept called third spaces. This is a concept that you'll find kind of over planning literature in a couple of places, but the fundamental idea is you have one space at home, you have one space at work, where else do you go? In America, we used to have a lot of these spaces, churches, community centers, bowling leagues. And particularly in my generation and our generation, those spaces are disappearing, whether because of the cost or because of cultural trends. It has become ever harder to find spaces to just go be a human being and not have to spend money or not have to work for a wage. So finding ways to build in our community the spaces that give us an opportunity to just be human and to live well is the second most important thing. Third most important thing has been said by both people up here, but sustainability. We're on the front line here of what will be a profoundly changed world by the time the three of us are retired and looking back on our lives. The 6 states that manage the Colorado River together just failed for the 3rd time to come to an agreement about how to equitably share the water in that river. There will be a moment where people realize there is not enough water in California, there's not enough water in Arizona, and they will look north. They will look where it's cooler, they will look where there is more water. If we are not building our city with an idea of what we will do when thousands, hundreds of thousands of people look up here and see our water and our comfort and the beautiful spaces we've built, they will overwhelm the systems that we're ready for. We should be ready and doing the work now to welcome them as neighbors in an equitable and safe way. That takes a lot of forethought and care. So that's the third thing. We're going to build a sustainable city that's sustainable in the short term and in the long term when big, big changes come for us.
Okay, now it's time for questions. So could the other panelists pull a chair up to the front? And then if you have a question or an idea, if you could raise your hand, someone will come around and pick that up for you. Only questions, no ideas?
No, she's good.
We have a lot of questions. And I will tell you that if we probably will not get through all these questions, but we will collate the questions and get the questions to the panelists after after we're finished here. You got a quick one up there that I can just get started with? Okay. Okay. Concerning housing development, such as the Pine View, is there any requirement to make at least some of the units affordable and/or available for housing vouchers, et cetera? I'm assuming this is going to go down to the end.
Yeah, so the MUPTI program requires that 10% of the tax exemption be provided to the Affordable Housing Fund. It also requires that a certain number of the units are affordable or that 10% contribution of the exemption to the fund. So that's how affordability is addressed in the MUPTI ordinance. And I would also draw attention to the affordable housing construction excise tax. A project of this scale will generate more than $1 million for that affordable housing construction excise tax fund to go into affordable housing. So with regard to the Pine View, those are 2 direct ways that it addresses affordable housing.
Is there a way to make the future that Robin described without making Corvallis a town of 100,000 plus? I'm going to pass this down to Robin.
Yeah, mathematically speaking, probably not. I'm no statistician, and I would defer to the city folks who maybe have a better sense of what the projection models look like. But generally speaking, we're if at least in my understanding of the world we're about to live in, probably the most sustainable and equitable way to interact with our natural world is to stay out of it more than we have been. Humanity has spread out widely across the planet, and we have a profound impact on the ecosystems that we inhabit. So one of the most important ways I think we can limit our impact on the world is to consolidate more into centers of human activity where we can take advantage of economies of scale. We can produce our electricity more efficiently from renewable sources. And to do that well, to do that effectively, we have to concentrate. We have to come together. We have to build systems to live together equitably and well in large population centers. And ultimately, that's one of the great strengths of humanity has always been that we can do that. We can build systems to get along even when there are a lot of us. So at least from my viewpoint, I don't see a world where we achieve a sustainable and equitable world without coming together into more populated city centers.
I would say too that what this gets at too is density, right? So you can increase the density without increasing the geographic size of the town necessarily, which should hopefully help this place still feel compact and feel like we don't have to drive 12 miles to get to a resource. It's still like you can ride your bike down Crystal Lake and get to downtown. There's just more people in those denser centers, which I think does make it very different than if we had 100,000 people living in large single-family lots that sprawled to the north of town or something.
If I may, I think this is where we work with Oregon State University. Higher education is changing dramatically. Oregon State is not going to grow the way it did in 2009 to 2011. The growth of educational opportunities is going to occur online. So the 24,000 students or so that are enrolled at Oregon State on campus now are going to remain relatively in that number. That gives us the opportunity, if growth is to occur in Corvallis, by our planning and by our community engagement to, as Robin offered, to bring more families to this community so there's play in our neighborhoods, laughter downtown, to have public places and spaces where people of all ages engage. The university and the Corvallis community now are about 59,000 people. We have a chance to make the next 31 to 41 the right size, the right type of community that we all want, not to be exclusionary, but to be inclusive.
Are there any specific ideas for using the waterfront, such as redoing the vegetation and making the river more visible to park users?
This has come up a lot on the task force. I think in every subcommittee, the usage of the waterfront has come up, and there seems to be a pretty huge appetite for just having better connection to the water overall, whether that's through ways we can actually access the water. Like right now, you can't touch the river very easily, but you could go up to Michael's Landing, which has mixed safety ratings, but developing that riverfront in a way that makes us feel more connected to the river itself. We are in a town with 2 rivers, and one of them we ignore entirely, and the other we can't touch. So having that seems to be something that's been coming up a lot, and I think people are pretty excited about.
I want to call attention to the North Riverfront plan that's been on the books for a long time. This is a great opportunity if we had future financing mechanisms like tax increment financing to undertake a major project like that without running into the Willamette River Greenway requirements that preserve our greenway space for good reason. Thinking more about the urban form of a place like Michael's Landing and how it could be improved is a compromise between the preservation goals that the city has and the development goals and the recreational opportunities that I think we all want to see.
Speakers have talked in conceptual terms about creating spaces and activities that make downtown attractive to diverse groups of people, but I don't know what you're really talking about. Can you turn those conceptual ideas into specific examples?
So everyone's going to have an opinion, but one way is to take Madison Avenue and make it more of a vital corridor between the river and OSU, to utilize spaces within the street where people gather, talk, play checkers, play a violin, or sit down at a piano they've never seen before and begin singing. Now, what does that look like? It looks like a whole bunch of people of different natures, ages, and types doing things, where now, if you look around our community, look at the signs and say closed, don't go here, no trespassing. We need to take those signs down and make the signs, you're welcome here and please come in. And that would be a major difference to preserving or enhancing community engagement. And so then the conversations of diversity begin to occur and the ages begin to occur. That's something I would recommend. Walk around downtown and check out the signs. Many of them are disturbing.
Yeah, so I'm full of concrete ideas. If you want to fund any of them and happen to have a couple $1 million hanging around, do let me know. Happy to follow up with you. Yeah, so I mean, for me, what this means is building intersecting spaces. So the city has already done great work in this respect, creating mixed-use zoning areas for commercial and residential spaces. One of the great advantages of that is that they are able to support one another. When you live in an area, you have a natural incentive to make it look nice, to take care of it. And similarly, business owners get someone who is living around their space during the off hours. There are people caring for the neighborhoods at all times of day who can look after one another, have different resources. The same is true of our public systems. So one of the ideas that occurs to me, a concrete idea, would be when we build government facilities, let's put in some of the things that the community wants to do and need in those same facilities. Let's build a health clinic attached to our government centers when we have offices where you go to fill out city paperwork. You could also go to a health center at the same time, and maybe a park right next door. Build these intersecting opportunities for people to come together and interact with one another. Maybe you play basketball with city staff when they get off work. It's a way to get us to connect as human beings outside of the roles that we play in our professional and personal lives. Another example of that would be creating a permanent structure downtown for some kind of performance, whether that's political conversation, rallies, speeches. Right now, we all stand out in front of the courthouse, those of us who are inclined to stand and yell about things, which is good for the soul. If you haven't done it once in your life, I highly encourage that you do it, maybe multiple times. It's very moving. But one disadvantage is because there's a freeway right there, and it's quite, or a highway, and it's quite loud. Once you're done standing and saying your bit, you spread out and disappear and go off into whatever you're going to do next. I think it would be wonderful if we had a public space where people could come together, actually hear each other because there aren't cars going quite right by, and then spread out into our downtown and patronize the spaces and businesses that are down there and really make a community effort of it. So those are a couple of the concrete ideas that come to mind when I talk about those more general things.
So we, to build on the idea of the SEC Plaza on campus has that nice covered area. We'd love to see something like that downtown. DCO has many ideas for street festivals and recurring events. We have our Friday lights that we're doing where businesses stay open late once a week. We have the Corvallis Arts Walk downtown, but there are times in the year that it would really help if we had an anchor event somewhere, and we don't have a place to do that. There's no like centralized, this is the spot in downtown. We've got Riverfront Park, but it's long, So if we had something like a bandstand downtown, that would offer us a lot of ways that we could create place in that way.
This is a really quick one. Is there a website for slides shown in Ryan's Ryan and Christopher's presentations. How can people get that information?
I can put it online and send the link, yescorvallis.org.
Okay, thanks. How does the proposed civic campus development fit into the picture? Will it be included in the vote on tax increment financing?
The city council and city staff continue to discuss the concept of a civic campus and the concept of improving law enforcement facilities for our police department. There is no present conversation that said urban renewal would fund a civic campus or building or a law enforcement facility. That may be part of the conversation, but in the future, but that hasn't been part of the conversation at present. A civic campus could include public spaces in Madison between, if there were those two buildings built. But what we see from both the council discussions and the community discussions that we're having is that there's a very measured sense of what should occur first, what should occur second or third. And I cannot imagine myself, and I'm just one person who lives there and pays taxes, that both would occur at the same time.
Okay, this is probably going to be the last question we have time for. Many of us have chosen to live in Corvallis for its small town charm. My home is in the Avery Helm neighborhood. It's on the historic registry. I never anticipated living next to a 13-story luxury apartment. Our current level of noise and lights make me miserable in my own yard. Where can I go?
We've talked a lot about affordable housing, talked a lot about the need for housing in our community. There's been a planning process to determine the rules about commercial mixed-use 3 zoning districts. What's been proposed is in fitting with the planning process and the community input that determined how tall buildings could be in this zone. The MUPD issue is not about the height of the property. It's about a property tax exemption that may be necessary for the project to be financially feasible. So I'm not going to pretend like it won't have impacts on neighbors. Of course it will. I live in a part of the community where the scale is changing dramatically too. And this is a reality of the need for density and choosing where that density needs to occur. And that policy decision has chosen that density shall occur in the commercial mixed-use 3 district.
From the perspective of Leadership Corvallis, not the Engage Corvallis hat, but I'm really involved with that organization. And what comes up when we watch these presentations from City of Corvallis employees is that if you are a person who has children and lives in a single-family house, a lot of your existence is being supported by people who are living in these huge apartment complexes and have a much smaller footprint. So those properties are paying a huge amount of taxes that fund the development of our sidewalks and that sort of thing. So density actually improves quality of life for everyone, even as I like living in a single family house, and I'm really grateful to do that. But I know that I'm super privileged to be able to do that.
Okay, in the ideas, there's one that's a real kind of idea rather than a question. I'm just going to read it quickly and then we'll have to end. Highway 99 routed in both directions on 4th Street. The street becomes a road with no parking. Roundabouts at Western, Jefferson, Monroe, Van Buren, Harrison, and Polk, but no vehicle crossing on or turns at any other street. East of 4th Street is the entertainment restaurant district. 3rd Street is a 2-way with back-end diagonal parking on both sides. The district is pedestrian friendly and car unfriendly. No traffic signals east of 5th Street. This person has really thought about this. And we're going to have to call it quits now. So let's thank all of our panelists. And enjoy the rest of your evening.